Truganini was Tasmania's last pure Aboriginal. Aboriginal life was not easy after the arrival of British colonists in 1803 on their territory. During St. George Arthur's tenure, he implemented a measure to try to end the conflicts that had been going on between the settlers and the natives. He offered a reward to anyone who captured Aboriginals. This period became known as Black War and lasted until 1832. Several people close to Truganini were killed. This war practically made the Aboriginal population disappear. The survivors moved to Flinders Island, but many still died from a variety of diseases there. In 1847, Truganini traveled to the Oyster Cove with some other Aboriginals and resumed their old habits. She died in 1877 in Hobart. Her remains were exhumed at the Royal Society of Tasmania 2 years after her death, and her skeleton was displayed at the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. John Simpson Kirkpatrick was an Australian soldier born in 1892 in England. Simpson joined the Australian Army as soon as the war broke out. He was a doctor in the First World War and used donkeys to help him. He had the idea of using the animal when he was carrying one of his injured companions on his shoulders and saw a donkey. Then he thought that it would be easier if the animal carried the things that he could not. So he started using them as helpers. In 1915, during a conflict, John was killed by a gunshot in the middle of the battlefield. His companions were extremely grateful for the services he provided and said he died trying to save lives and doing his best. Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who was born in 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany. When the Second World War begins, the girl and her family moved to Holland. When Adolf Hitler started capturing Jews and sending them to concentration camps, Anne's family was forced to hide in an attic in the office building of Otto, Anne's father, in Amsterdam. They take refuge with another family and another man who is their friend. The space was tight in the annex and everyone is forced to remain very quiet for a good part of the time, and they were always very afraid. When Anne turns 13, just before they go to hiding, the girl gets a diary as a birthday gift, and during the 2 years they spend in hiding, she writes everything that goes on in the attachment and all of her thoughts. The attachment is discovered by the police in August 1944. Everyone is taken away, but the writings were preserved by friends who helped the people who lived in the annex. Anne is sent to the Auschwitz camp, and she is cast along with her mother and her sister for women's work. In November 1944, Anne is transported with her sister to the Bergen-Belsen camp, and the two die of typhoid fever in early 1945. Of all the people hiding in the annex, the only survivor is Otto, and he publishes his daughter's diaries in 1947, and the book gets famous worldwide.
The Great Soul. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born in 1869 in India. At that time, India was still part of the British Empire, and Gandhi considered himself a loyal citizen of the empire. When he went to South Africa, he saw the injustice that South African Indians suffered at the hands of Europeans. From then on, he started trying to help the Indians who had been treated unfairly by the British authorities. After the British Empire created a new law, which said that people who opposed the empire would be arrested, he started a campaign against the government that quickly spread across the country. Gandhi led a march to Dandi Beach, in the state of Gujarat. There, he broke the law by collecting salt. Gandhi and 60,000 others were arrested, as the British had outlawed the production of their own salt by poor Indians. In 1942, Gandhi asked the British to leave India. He ended up being arrested again, along with other Indian leaders. Hindu, who opposed peace with Muslims, murdered Gandhi after he did not want violence between Hindus and Muslims. Today, he is remembered as the father of his people. Its title is Mahatma, which means great soul. The Lady with the Lamp. Florence Nightingale, 12 May 1820 to 13 August 1910, was an English social reformer, statistician, and the founder of modern nursing. Nightingale came to prominence while serving as a manager and trainer of nurses during the Crimean War, in which she organized care for wounded soldiers. She gave nursing a favorable reputation and became an icon of Victorian culture, especially in the persona of the Lady with the Lamp, making rounds of wounded soldiers at night. Nightingale was a prodigious and versatile writer. In her lifetime, much of her published work was concerned with spreading medical knowledge. Some of her tracts were written in simple English so that they could easily be understood by those with poor literary skills. She was also a pioneer in data visualization, which the use of infographics effectively using graphical presentations of statistical data. Much of her writing, including her extensive work of religion and mysticism, has only been published posthumously. Florence Nightingale died peacefully in her sleep in her room at 10 South Street, Mayfair, London, on 13 August 1910, at the age of 90. The offer of burial in Westminster Abbey was declined by her relative, and she is buried in the churchyard of St. Margaret's Church in East Willow, Hampshire, near Embley Park, with a memorial of the optimal simplicity with just her initials and dates of birth and death. She left a large body of work, including several hundred notes that were previously unpublished. A memorial monument to Nightingale was created in Carrara marble by Francis William Sargent in 1913 and placed in the cloister of the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence, Italy. Heroic pilot saves lives. Captain Chelsea B. Sullenberger had a flight with 150 people to make and had to stop in New York. But while Chelsea was flying, he was hit by several birds and the plane's engines ended up crashing and falling to the surface. Sullenberger had to stay calm and think of a quick fix and decided to land off the nearby Hudson River. The pilot controlled the plane to go slowly and not to turn, and with years of skill and experience, he landed the plane very calmly and safely, saving the lives of passengers and crew. It was a very brave and courageous act. At no time did Chelsea lose control of his situation, and that is why he was called a hero by many.
Julia Tanti saves the day. Julia Tanti and her friend Katie Moulton were walking near the beach slowly. As Juliet has a chronic fatigue syndrome, when they hear screams from a group of people, the girls came closer, seeing the people drowning in the sea. Katie ran to get help and Julia watched, but not for long. Even with her illness, Juliet went towards the sea and swam to a child named Daniel, lifted it up to get a breath, and swam with him to the surface. Many people were surprised by Juliet's courage and adrenaline. The girl could have died, but even so she risked her life for a stranger, and that's why people consider her a hero. The blazing fields. Oji-san lived on the edge of the plateau that overlooked the village nestled in the valley. He was the wealthiest man in the village, and those rows of gathered up rice represent his fortune. He watched their preparations for this festival that would celebrate the successful harvest. An earthquake came. Odin's Oji's son was not frightened, and the tremor was not a large one, but there was still something strange about it. The tsunami came, swept up the beach, and smashed into the houses. The village was gone, and moments later the sound of the destruction arrived high on the plateau. The tsunami destroyed 30,000 buildings along the coast of Japan. Over 3,000 people lost their lives. But in the old Jisan's village, not a single person died. After a while, the people rebuilt their homes, and at the center of the village, they built a temple to honor the man who saved them. They didn't call him Oji-san. He was known as Dei Myojin. Bethany Hamilton. Bethany Hamilton was surfing off the coast of Makua Beach, Hawaii, when the 4.5-meter tiger shark attacked her and lost estimated 7% of her blood. She spent a few days in the hospital and then she returned home to think about what she was going to do in the future. She returned to the surf at the beginning. She returned to the surf. At the beginning, she found it very hard to surf with just one arm, and she has become a surf champion after a while. After a while, she was surfing as well as she had before the attack. Bethany started to become famous after telling her story on television and writing a book. She did it to inspire other young people, and the fame has not changed her. Based on the camera, she doesn't try using a prosthetic arm. Our heroines, mothers. We chose to talk about all the mothers because we recognize that it is not an easy job. It is not just about changing diapers, but about all the teachings that are passed to a child. Mothers are able to do absolutely anything for their children and also want to keep up with all the steps and new learnings regardless of their child's age. Being a mother means changing your life, your time, your thinking, giving all your heart, your love to take your children forward and teach them how to live. We have to be grateful for everything they had always done for us, since before we were born, for everything that mothers or any other maternal figure provides us with. All the learnings that we are sure we will take for our whole life. They are really the real heroines.